The Landmarks Board is called to order. Welcome to the February 1st, 2023 Landmarks Board meeting. It is 6 p.m. The first thing this evening, I'll introduce our moderator, Brenda Rittenauer.
Hello, thank you so much, Abby, and welcome everyone. Welcome to our community members who've joined us tonight. And I think Aubrey will share slides. Great, thank you so much. Marcy will share slides. So we do always like to start this meeting just sharing some of our some words about our vision for how we come together as a community. We know some of you may have seen these slides before, and we appreciate your patience while we run through them for those who are less familiar with this particular process that we have at the city. We want to share with you that the city is engaged with community members to co-create a vision for productive, meaningful, and inclusive civic conversations. This vision is designed to support the physical and emotional safety of community members, staff, and board and commission members, as well as supporting democracy for people of all ages, identities, lived experiences, and political perspectives. More about this vision and the project's community engagement process can be found by going to the city's website, bouldercolorado.gov, and using the search function to search productive atmospheres. Next slide, please. The following are examples of rules of decorum that are found in the Boulder Revised Code and other guidelines that support this vision, and we will work to uphold these guidelines during this meeting. All remarks and testimony shall be limited to matters related to city business and when it's a public hearing related to that specific subject. No participants shall make threats or use other forms of intimidation against any person. Obscenity, racial epithets, and other speech and behavior that disrupts or otherwise impedes the ability to conduct this meeting are prohibited. And participants may raise their hand to speak during open comment and public comment during public hearings. Individuals must display their whole name before being allowed to speak online. I do see one person on our participant list whose whole name I can't see. So if you plan to speak tonight, please send me your whole name in the Q&A box. And currently only audio testimony is permitted. And with that, I think we're ready to move forward.
Thank you, Brenda, for reviewing the virtual meeting decorum. I do want to acknowledge that we have a quorum tonight, although we do not have a full quorum. There are 3 board members present of the 5, and we'll very quickly introduce ourselves. I'm Abby Daniels, Chair of the Landmarks Board. Bill
Jellick.
John.
I'm John Decker.
And then Laura.
Hi, I'm Laura Kaplan. I'm the liaison to the Planning Board. I do not vote with Landmarks Board.
Thank you, Laura. As with in-person Landmark Board meetings, the recording of this meeting will be available in the record archives and on YouTube within 28 days of this meeting. We know there are people here who might want to participate who may have strong emotions about a particular project. We want to hear you and have found it more productive if you're speaking to persuade us rather than berating us, staff, or the applicant. As with regular Landmarks Board meetings, you may only speak at the appropriate time during public participation or at the appropriate time during the one public hearing we'll be holding tonight. Requests to speak outside of those times are denied. The hearing this evening is a quasi-judicial hearing, so any person testifying, including the applicant, will be sworn in individually. As board chair, I will call for a roll call vote on any motions that are made. And now I think if you could pull up the group agreements. This is a living document. Changes are always welcome, and we continue to encourage open dialogue. Board members are welcome to use the raised hand feature to introduce a new topic during our deliberations later in the meeting. And these group agreements come out of our Landmarks Board retreat held on July 25th last year. So we'll move on to the first agenda item, which is approval of minutes from the January 4th, 2023 meeting. John or Bill, do you have any changes or amendments to the meeting minutes?
None.
No, I have none.
Okay, hearing none and seeing no raised hands. I move that we approve these minutes. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, John. We'll do a quick roll call. Bill,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
I vote aye, so the minute meetings of the January 4th meeting are approved. Next, we'll move on to public participation for anything that's not on the agenda tonight. And Brenda, I don't know if anyone has raised their hand, but I know you'll give them a few minutes to indicate if they're interested in speaking.
I will, and if you have not joined us for this portion before, you will see a raised hand button at the bottom of your screen. And by clicking on that button is how you can indicate to us that you would like to participate in the public hearing. At this point, I do have one hand up, so we will go ahead and get started. You will find, as you speak, you'll find a timer in the upper corner of Aubrey Noble's screen. So we'll make sure that you see that as you speak. Our first speaker is Patrick O'Rourke. Patrick, we're going to give you your mute button, and then Abby will swear you in before you begin.
Welcome, Patrick. And if you will be kind enough to raise your hand and swear to tell the board the whole truth.
I swear to tell the whole truth.
Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to touch base on about 3 or 4 items. Number one is I listened to the Parks and Recreation Board meeting on January 23rd, and it came up at their meeting on a conversation about having in-person meetings, that the position of the city council is that unless there's health issues, in-person meetings are really being recommended. And so I just wanted to know, because I looked at your agendas and all your meetings tonight and in the future are all virtual. And I'm just concerned that, maybe this would be time to flip that switch and get to these mixed meetings that are both virtual and in person. That being said, the CPI conference is this week, and I want to thank Claire. Claire and I are going to be the docents for the Pearl Street Mall portion of it on Friday afternoon at 1 to 3. And this year the meeting is Wednesday through Friday, so I'm hoping to see you there. On Friday night is our Historic Boulders Gala, and that's our 50-year anniversary. So I really appreciate all the support we've gotten from the Landmarks Board, and we're looking forward to a long and fruitful future together. That being said, I'm concerned about the future of the possibility of a historic district because I did listen to the Parks and Recs meeting last week, and it really didn't sound like they were going to go in any direction. And so I think now would be the time, not tonight, but in the near future, and it was recommended at that meeting that there be a joint meeting with the Landmarks Board and the Parks and Rec Board to see if this is a viable option. So I might think that would be a meeting that they do in person now that the HIP is completed. That was one of the reasons why it wasn't, the Bandshell expansion was not approved last year. And then I have the documents, and I'll bring it to any meeting, that there's a commitment from the city council to have this reviewed and voted on hopefully by the end of this year. That being said, I think I might be out of town. If not, I just want to let you know that Historic Boulders currently involved in about 5 or 6 other projects in Boulder County, starting with the 9 Mile Marker project. We're a stakeholder in that, and we're going to make recommendations. I'll fill you in at another time, along with the Belmont School. And then I've just made contact with the Tommy Jones Stagecoach owner. If you're not familiar with the Tommy Jones Stagecoach, is over on Belmont, and the owner's name is Don Rogers. He's ill, but he's agreed to let
Patrick,
us.
your time is up, so maybe just
Okay.
finish this sentence, please.
I'll finish it. And that's all I had, and I'm looking forward to reviewing the HIP at some future date with both the Parks Board and the Landmarks Board. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Brenda, do you see anyone else who has raised their hand?
I don't see any other hands at the moment. There's one more hand, so we will turn to Lynn Siegel. Lynn, I will enable your microphone and then Abby will swear you in.
Hi, Aubrey. That was James Hunter that I was trying to remember last night. How could I forget James Hunter's name? Jeez, he's done everything in Boulder. I just wanted to bring up something today from the LDRC. For one, I really implore you to please record LDRC. This is where the meat of everything comes together. And I can't go in and sit in staff's room and see what they're actually doing, you know, but I can at the LDRC. And God forbid, I dozed off for the last 30 seconds of the meeting today. God help me. It was a 4.5-hour meeting. And that was important, very important, because that sign in Wells Fargo was approved. And I would like to not have to call John Decker and talk to him about it, although we did speak about other things, among them Dushanbe Tea House. But I'd like to just pull up the thing, not bother you, and just be able to review certain things I've seen and maybe freeze frame on things that I want to read. That it's hard, like John was mentioning today. I wanted to know where the 5 guidelines were that were for the illuminated signs on buildings, because this one was in the building, and that's out of the jurisdiction of the landmarks. So why did it even come? It has a permit. It can go through Design Advisory Board, I guess, pushed it ahead. John, and correct me if you disagree, it seemed like it was kind of bleeding between the inside and the outside because it was so well visualized from the outside to have this illuminated sign. I was just surprised that it was approved. Not as bad as 777 Circle, God forbid. But, and I thought, where's Lucas? Because this is a legal issue. It should be clear if it's indoors, it's not applicable to the Landmarks Board or the LDRC. It should just be that it's indoors and it's not legislated on, even if you can see it from the outside. And that should have been clarified legally, I thought. Anyway, so I was just surprised it got it approved. I found out today, it's interesting because I met someone that's very involved with the Dushanbe Tea House and was interested in it. And we spoke briefly about the fact that the inside and the outside distinction came up at Dushanbe because Dushanbe Tea House was not, and this woman who's from Tajikistan told me it's not approvable for them, you know, to have a tea house like that that's walled in. And it's also not approvable to have a fountain, and there's a fountain inside the tea house.
Lynn, I apologize, but your time is up.
Yeah. Anyway, her name is Svetlana Moiseve, and it was interesting talking with her. And she was concerned that maybe the Dushanbe relationship has broken down because of the situation in Russia, Ukraine. Anyway, thanks.
Thank you, Lynn.
And I do not see any other hands at this time. So last call on open comment tonight. And I think we are clear to close, Abby.
So we will close public participation for this meeting, and we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is a discussion of landmark alteration, demolition applications issued and pending.
Sure, and we are no longer doing a monthly statistical report at the board meetings, but this is time for questions about any pending or closed applications. And I also wanted to remind you all about the active stay of demolition at 2119 Mariposa. The stay of demolition expires at the end of May, and we have a site visit confirmed with the owner on Friday, February 3rd, so this Friday at 2 p.m. And Abby and John are the designated Landmarks Board representatives. Are there any questions about this case or any others that have been reviewed or approved in the last month? All right. Back to you, Abby.
Thank you, Marcy. So we will move on to our public hearing this evening. Item 5A. It's a public hearing in consideration of an application to demolish a building constructed in 1965 at 105 Bellevue Drive, a non-landmarked building over 50 years old pursuant to section 91123 of the Boulder Revised Code. And because there are 3 Landmarks Board members this evening, staff did give the other 2 applicants the opportunity to postpone their public hearings till we have a full board again on March 1st. So this is the only hearing tonight. And I know Marcy will address this as well in her presentation, but it will take a unanimous vote on any proposed motions to take action this evening.
All right, I'll get started. So the quasi-judicial process begins with all speaking to the item are sworn in, and then board members will note any ex parte contacts. I'll then give a staff presentation followed by questions from the board. The applicant then has 10 minutes to present, and the board may ask questions of the applicant. The public hearing is then open for comment at 3 minutes each, and the board may ask questions of anyone that speaks. And then the applicant has a chance to respond to anything that was said. After that, the public hearing is closed and the board discusses, and a motion requires an affirmative vote of at least 3 members to pass. So as Abby said, that means a unanimous decision because there's 3 board members here tonight. Your motion must state findings, conclusions, and a recommendation. And finally, a record of the hearing is available. So with that, I turn it back over to you, Abby, for ex parte contacts.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. Bill,
I have none.
John,
I don't have any.
and I have none.
Great. All right, so as Abby mentioned, this is a review for a demolition of a building over 50 years old. The purpose of the Historic Preservation Demolition Review is to prevent the loss of buildings that may have historic or architectural significance, and to provide the time necessary to initiate designation as an individual landmark or to consider alternatives to the building. The criteria for your review tonight is found in 91123 of the Boulder Revised Code, which includes the eligibility of the building for designation as a landmark, the relationship of the building to the character of the neighborhood, the reasonable condition of the building, and the reasonable projected cost of restoration or repair. And in considering the condition and the cost, the board may not consider deterioration caused by unreasonable neglect. You have 3 options in front of you tonight. You can approve the demolition request, and that approval is valid for 180 days. You could place a stay of demolition on the application in order to provide time to consider alternatives to demolition. That would expire on June 12th. Or you could initiate the process for landmarks designation, and that would mean scheduling an initiation hearing. With 3 board members, votes must be unanimous tonight to take action. And the code says that failure to take action on a demolition permit is considered an approval. And so if you're heading towards a split vote, one option that you have would be to make a motion to continue the hearing. That hearing would still need to be held within 75 days of a complete application. And so that would be a special meeting held before February 27th. This application came into our department at the end of November, and in mid-December, staff referred the application to the Landmarks Board, finding there was probable cause to believe the building may be eligible. So typically, applications that come to the board first go to the Landmarks Design Review Committee. The code makes a distinction that initial review for post-1940 buildings is an administrative review. So none of the board members have seen this application before. And that brings us tonight, February 1st, for the Landmarks Board demolition hearing. This property is located in the Lower Chautauqua neighborhood, just before the switchback of Bellevue Drive. And the driveway for the property is accessed through a private drive from Mesa Canyon Drive. And then it backs up to the Boulder open space. The building was constructed in 1965. It's a 1- and 2-story frame house with a low-pitched roof, overhanging eaves, and exposed purlins. This is the south elevation, and the full wall of windows, including the trapezoid windows at the top, are typical of custom contemporary ranch houses from this period. Moving around to the east elevation, you can see the extended purlins at the front and a wide, low stone chimney, also typical of this rustic style. And then the covered deck, which is a prominent feature on this elevation, was extended in 1989. This is the rear of the building, the north elevation, and it has little ornamentation with vertical board and batten siding, wood siding. And then the west elevation has the garage built into the grade with a retaining wall that extends along the west side. And then the main entrance to the building is, I think, well, I won't use my pointer, are the peach colored doors in the lower right-hand photo, right of the garage. The house was built by George and Betty Sherritt, who have been the property's sole owners. And according to Mrs. Sherritt's obituary, she designed and built her own house and had the plans drafted by an architectural student at CU. And the owners provided these drawings, which they found in the house. So the criteria, as I mentioned, are found in 91123 of the Boulder Revised Code. And we will start with the eligibility for landmark designation. So staff has found or considers that the house does not have historic significance. It was designed by Betty Sherritt for her family and constructed in 1965. And this was the only house that Mrs. Sherritt designed. She didn't go on to design other houses or have an architectural career. The steep grade and non-standard lot in this area resulted in a number of innovative custom buildings in this neighborhood. However, we don't consider that this building exemplifies that trend, and it has not been identified as significant by any outside authorities. In terms of architectural significance, staff considers this to be a rustic modern or contemporary custom ranch in a mountain style. The low pitch roof with overhanging eaves, vertical siding, and the built-in garage and the wide chimney are typical of mid-century custom ranches. And then the addition of the trapezoidal windows take advantage of the southern exposure. However, we found that this isn't an excellent example of that style, but it is relatively intact to its original construction. As I mentioned, it's an interesting history of the original owner designing the house, but she was not considered an architect, nor did she have a career beyond designing this house. And then we did not find that it had artistic merit, and the stone may be local, though we weren't able to verify that. And then in terms of example of the uncommon, it is notable that a woman designed a house during this period, though it's not completely unique. We did want to note it. And then in terms of its environmental significance, we did not consider that it met the environmental significance criteria or geographic importance. It's not located in an identified potential historic district, though, as I'll go into, there are many notable mid-century buildings in the surrounding area. And then it does not have geographic importance because it was designed to be hidden in the hillside rather than a prominent feature. So it's actually pretty difficult to see from the public right-of-way. So in terms of the relationship to the neighborhood, we go into a bit more detail in the staff memo, but it is notable that in this area of Lower Chautauqua, this neighborhood developed over a pretty long period of time, with the earliest houses being close to the turn of the 20th century, but really picking up in the mid-century. And the kind of dramatic grade resulted in some of Boulder's most innovative mid-century designs, and designs that really responded to the grade. And so within a quarter-mile radius of this property is the Prather House at 230 Bellevue, which is designed by Jerry Van Sickle from 1965. The iconic Willard House, designed by Charles Hartling and built in 1962, is just adjacent to this property to the north. His Davis House is just below the hillside. That one was completed in 1971. 1405 Bellevue, which has been recently renovated. That was built in 1968 by Bruce Downing and Associates. The Creeth House by John A. Thacker is over on Sierra Drive, and then the Albersheim House, another Hartling design, completed in 1965, is located on Bellevue. And so many of these were included in the 2000 Modernism survey and found to be potentially eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. So in terms of the relationship to the neighborhood, this mid-century building is in close proximity to these, I would say, significant mid-century designs, but it's staff's opinion that it doesn't quite rise to the same level. I will defer to the applicant to discuss the condition of the building and the projected cost of restoration or repair. They submitted thorough information about the water issues and the construction issues that are currently at the house. And so I would end by saying our recommendation is to approve the demolition permit, finding that the building is not potentially eligible for designation. I also would like to say that this was an application that we as staff referred to the board, finding it was potentially eligible. And I do feel that it was worthwhile in terms of doing the additional research and learning more about this property to then bring it to the full board. And I would personally like to thank Mr. Sherritt for providing a firsthand account of the history of the house as well as the original drawings. So I feel that this process has resulted in the documentation of this kind of key period of Boulder's history. But at the end of the day, staff finds that this building's not potentially eligible and would recommend approval of the demolition request. And so with that, I would just like to check back in on the process. So I've completed my staff presentation. We now turn to the applicant presentation, followed by public comment. The applicant then has a chance to respond, and then it goes to the board for deliberation and a vote. And I will check back in afterwards to do a quick time check, or perhaps Abby, you could do that once the applicant has a chance to respond to anything that was said. do a quick time check of what generally 30 minutes would be. The key question in front of you all tonight is, does this building have historic significance? If yes, place a stay of demolition on the application to provide time to consider alternatives to demolition. If no, then approve the demolition request. And I'm happy to answer any questions about the this property and case or about the process.
John or Bill, do you have any questions for Marcy?
I have a question. Marcy, in your process, you refer to the surrounding grades in this neighborhood. Would you have viewed this particular house any differently if it was standing in a neighborhood of otherwise pretty unexceptional houses from the same time period, like if it was in Martin Acres or?
Yeah, I think we probably would have looked at it differently, because I think that there very specifically, there actually are, there's a model in Table Mesa that looks similar, but I would say a bit different. And the context of this house on a flat lot or a slight grade is very different from kind of this more, I would say, rustic setting for a rustic modern house. And so I think the setting was part of the reason we wanted to look a little more closely, and then also understand how does this relate to the other mid-century buildings that developed. I think what's also different about this one is that while Martin Acres and Table Mesa were designed and built by a single construction company or a larger developer, this area, it was individual designs and custom homes that I think give it a bit of a different context than the kind of post-war suburbs.
Okay, that answers that. You didn't happen to find out who the student was that drew up?
I wish, and I don't think they signed their drawings either, but that would have been nice.
That's all I have. Thanks.
Bill, do you have any questions?
No, I don't.
Thank you. So we'll move on to the applicant's presentation, and thank you to the applicants who have agreed to this virtual quasi-judicial hearing. You will have 10 minutes and we will need to swear in anyone speaking during this presentation.
Jay and Stephen, you will need to accept the pop-up invitation that comes up to make you panelists at the meeting. Let's see, we got Stephen, but I still have Jay on the attendee list.
Good morning, folks. Actually, good evening, folks. Does everybody hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes, is Jay also planning to speak?
I don't think so.
Okay,
he
great.
can raise his hand if he wants to. I believe he is here, though.
He is
But,
here.
we'll let him decide if he would like to or not, though. But I swear to tell the truth
Thank you.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
And I have a short presentation tonight, as usual. Marcy and her team put together a very articulate understanding of this building. I think as she mentioned, the good part of this process was that it was able to really document the uniqueness of Mrs. Sherritt actually designing this. I did, in my conversations with Jay, learned a lot about the process, and it was interesting. And I think, in spite of my strong recommendation that this house should be allowed to be demolished, I think it's good to record it for history's sake. But I'm going to focus my discussion this evening really on two general topics: structural deficiencies and importantly, design deficiencies. And I'll get into those a little bit later here, but I'm going to go through these. I've got 25 photos. Some of these were in the packet, but I will just elaborate a little bit more here. But the house was, as we know, it was built in 65 and it's 58 years old now. And in talking with the applicant, they shared a lot of continuing problems throughout the time that they lived there. It evidently just was not built, constructed, or designed in an efficient manner. So we'll go through these slides. I'll just say next. Yeah, that's a good one. So one of the biggest problems in this whole house from a design standpoint was this retaining wall that we see on the right side, which is the left side of the garage when you're driving in, was not sufficiently designed to withstand the lateral pressures of the earth. But that said, the entire house was engineered to that. And as a result of this lateral loading, it tipped over and it was putting continual pressure. What's really interesting is the garage door is a vertical garage door. Well, you can see the tapered wood piece right there by the door that over time, this hillside has caused the top portion of it to tilt probably 6 to 8 inches. Next slide. In addition to that, the whole hillside is pushing in there and again, cracking the wall. And again, these are putting forces on the roof, and which is precipitating into a lot of structural issues on the inside of the house. You also see a lot of effervescence, which is the white sediment on the walls, which is indicative of water problems. Next slide. Here's looking at the east wall, and again, those cracks continue throughout the wall. Next slide. These are some of the water problems. So as the roof is pushed over, it tends to break apart the waterproof membranes. And in talking with Jay Sheretz, they would fix the roof, but in a few years later, after another inch or so of movement, they would have to fix it again. They were continually having to fix this house. Next slide. This is looking then on the, I think we're still in the garage, looking back to the east here, and again, more water problems. Next slide. And a nice shot of the pan there, the dust pan. We can see here the roof is separating from the wall, water going behind the wallpaper. Next slide. This is a very interesting slide. This is at the front entrance, and what this is showing is differential settlement. Not to get too technical, but right when you go into the basement, you'll see a steel beam right underneath this, and evidently the steel beam was adequately supported, but the surrounding foundation was not supported. And so what we're seeing here is differential settlement, where the edges sink while the structural line created by the steel beam did not, and as a result, it's folding in the middle and cracking. Next slide. Just more cracks. This is a ceiling in one of the bedrooms. There's just cracks throughout. Next slide. Here's again the wall separating from the ceiling. Interesting fleur-de-lis wallpaper. There's a lot of wallpaper in there. It was kind of fun watching looking at all the different kinds of wallpaper. Next slide. Now we're starting to look at the exterior of the house. While it was of a chalet design, which was, she called it a chalet design. I think Marcy called it a contemporary mountain, but Mrs. Sherritt always said she wanted a chalet design, and this is her interpretation of a chalet design. But anyway, as we can see, very maintenance occurred in the latter part of its life. And as you can see, a lot of the wood is starting to rot. virtually almost all the wood would have to be removed. It's even challenging to be recycled because a lot of it is cupped. Next slide. Typical corner board where you see the fascia and the flashing over the top, but nevertheless, water is getting in under behind the fascia, again, rotting it. Next slide. A lot of the beams were rotted as well. This is a side view of a beam holding up the roof. Next slide. This one really has seen better days. And this one obviously is almost dangerous. Next slide. Sorry about the gray-haired guy. I don't know who that guy is, but we're moving into what I'm calling the design deficiencies. And the first thing that struck me when I looked at this house was I hit my head. I'm 6'2", and I'm walking in there, and while the design did exhibit characteristics of this chalet design, whoever really did the design and did the sections, and they were not mindful of really how the roof eaves related to the walking passageways. And you can see carpet on the corner. Next slide. This is carpet, and the reason the carpet's not there for waterproofing, the carpet is there to protect people from bumping their heads. It's the old classic rubber on the corner of your range hood in my house that I always hit my head on. Next slide. And had this kind of interesting circular stair. The interesting story about the stair was evidently when it was originally filed for building permit, the building department kicked it out because this is not illegal. It's not a legal stair today, nor was it a legal stairway back in 1965. But ultimately they allowed it to go through because they ultimately argued that the upstairs and the downstairs were essentially two areas, and they technically by code did not need to communicate with the stairway. Both the upper and the outer, but the upper and the lower floors were accessible by code egress. So this stairway really was not very functional at all. The other anecdotal story was after they built it, well, they realized they couldn't get any furniture downstairs through this stairway as well. So they had to create a special pathway. And so these are just examples of what I'm calling design deficiencies. And, these things happen. And, but that said, just, I think tends to diminish the historic value of this house. Next slide. Another stairway. Next slide. Here's the bottom of it. The stair wiggles when you go down. The structure on it is not very strong at all. It's kind of a little scary going down there. Next slide. And then this was an interesting design feature that Mrs. Sherritt's thought would work that failed miserably, both functionally and waterproofing wise. It was a self-contained, we do some of these today in some of the homes that we design where you design the bathtub and the shower all together here. Well, this is a 1965 version of it, which was kind of interesting. It was a shower, but also was designed to be a bathtub, but it never ever really worked. Evidently, the size wasn't correct to be very comfortable, and it leaked continually. And so it was a long-term maintenance problem. They were always fixing it, but nevertheless, it's kind of a unique design that a true 1965 modernistic design. Next slide. Just more wall separating. Next slide. This is interesting. You can see the window well sinking on the left and high on the right again, and you can see the walls cracking. Next slide.
Stephen, I'm so sorry, but your 10 minutes has already elapsed, but if you can wrap up really quickly, that would be great.
We've got 3 slides left. More water damage. Next slide. code violation, the furnace draws air from the garage, which is not legal. Next slide. This is it. So I guess I only had 24 slides. So anyway, I think basically it hinges on structural deficiencies and design deficiencies. And particularly, I like the way Marcy stated that it's in this neighborhood with some of my favorite buildings. The two adjoining Charles Hartling buildings are just amazing buildings. And those are the types of buildings that really need to preserve. This one, while interesting, just has way too many deficiencies. So I respectfully request that the Landmarks Board please approve this demolition permit. And I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. Bill or John, do you have any questions for Stephen?
I have none.
I don't have any either. It's pretty
And
straight ahead.
I don't either. Thank you for sharing all of those images, Stephen. We will now move on to public comment for this hearing. I don't know, Brenda, if you see any raised hands yet, or if people, if you're on your phone, press *9.
We do have one raised hand at the moment. And so I'll just remind everyone, you'll find that raised hand button at the bottom of your screen. So we will start with Patrick O'Rourke. Again, Patrick, I will enable your microphone and Abby will swear you in.
I'll swear you in, Patrick, and you will have 3 minutes. So once you've swear to tell us the whole truth.
I swear to tell the whole truth. Thank you. We spent almost an hour discussing this one property last night because it was a dilemma for the Historic Boulder Preservation Committee. And it didn't necessarily have to do with the house as it does with the setting and what we considered, and it's not a historic district, but to have 6 significant homes within a quarter of a mile makes it an important area. And we haven't had the chance to look at the other 12 houses that might finish that puzzle. Therefore, we're concerned that what'll go up there, and we have 3 architects on our board, 2 which were on the Landmarks Board at one time, or I actually take it back, all 3 of them were, but Catherine wasn't there last night. We agree with Marcy's description. This is definitely a contributing house. It is not a significant home. And for that reason, the dilemma we had is, should these houses have a 180-day delay? And this came up with Chelsea some time ago, because we would not necessarily recommend designating this house over the objections of the owner. But I reversed that question to this board, is what if this owner bought this building before this Landmarks Board and asked for you to designate it? Would you? And quite honestly, I think the answer to that would be yes. And so that's the dilemma that Chelsea brought it up a few months ago. And I think that's the position we would take, to take a number 2, which is it's a 180-day delay because it is contributing. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Is there anyone else wishing to comment?
I have one other hand up at this time. So Lynn Siegel, I will enable your microphone and Abby will swear you in.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. If you would swear once
There's
again.
a lot of good solar. Oh, I swear to tell my perception of the truth. I do
Thank
not
you.
own the truth. Sorry, folks.
Thank you.
I like the solar aspects of this design. I like the chalet. I like the fact that she designed it herself. And just because she isn't an architect as a result, she functionally designed her own house. I wish I had the initiative to do that with my place, to change it, because I didn't design it originally myself. But I think that's valuable. I don't get into gender stuff, whether she's a woman or not. She was a person that designed her own house, that brought in a student, from CU. That's significant. I think that's very cool that CU was used. It's an expense to develop these places in the foothills right here. It's like with 777, that's a friggin' disaster to tear that down and bring that out. And especially when that place was in perfect shape. It's just stunning to me that you ever agreed to demo 777. I'm sorry. I can't stand. I'm so upset about that. But aside from that, with this house, I think architects in Boulder could be a lot more creative about, and I love Stephen Sparn, his work's great. And actually he did the house that Spackler, or the guy that built 777, and Corricini, the guy working on the Saturn V. Sparn did that other house on Flagstaff, and he incorporated the certain elements of that Usonian design. And he actually, interestingly, saved the retaining wall, which in this case, in this house, the retaining wall is kind of put to blame for its problems. But there are ways to shore up things, you know, instead of just tearing down and bringing new in. There are ways. I don't think Stephen extrapolated about that. And I think that the 180-day stay would be appropriate as a result. The best thing they always say, and this should be going before Environmental Advisory Board, before Landmarks Board, or with Landmarks Board. There's not even a liaison of the EAB with Landmarks. Like, what gives here? Let's see. You, for example, got a problem with a cheap stairway, rip it out, put in a regular stairway. You know, you got a big beam. Hey, you're save what you can of the roof, put in another beam, you know, tear it apart, get a crane in there, do some things. Maybe it'll be, you know, expensive. Maybe it'll be hard to do, but maybe it's almost equivalent to what putting in a new place in there would do.
Lynn, thank you so much, but your time has expired.
Oh, and the furnace and the air, that's a simple problem. You divert the air.
Thank you, Lynn. And Brenda, before we close public comment for this hearing, do you see any other raised hands?
I do not see any other raised hands at this time. We'll just wait a few seconds to let people find that button if they need it. And I think we are clear to close.
So we'll close public comment for this hearing. And Stephen, you would have 3 minutes to rebut or speak to anything either member of the public shared.
Okay, I always forget I'm automatically muted. Yes, I would like to speak to a couple of things. I didn't quite have enough time to talk about costs, but it really truly is cost prohibitive to if you removed all of the surfaces and fixed everything, you still end up with a deficient design. That is my premise here, that it really isn't that well of a design building. It does have some character. It does have a little bit of unique history, but at the end of the day, it's bad design. It just is not good. And you would be throwing good money at bad to put money into this. I also wanted to address Patrick O'Rourke. I agree with Patrick's statement that typically you do not landmark over the owner's wishes. I think that is very clear that these owners are not interested in saving this. If it was reversed, if they would requested that the Landmarks Board landmark it, well, they're not doing that. So that is a completely hypothetical question and is not relevant to this hearing. So, but I do agree that the owners do not want to landmark this building. They would like to get a demolition permit, and they have been very forthright in sharing the history of this house. But at the end of the day, It's structurally deficient, and quite frankly, it is just not very superior design, particularly in the context of all these other wonderful buildings. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. So now we're going to move on to board discussion. I ask that everyone else mute your computer or phone for the duration of this discussion. We've allotted or estimated about 30 minutes for this deliberation, but we'll take as long as we need. And Laura, I'll be sure to ask you if you have anything you want to add. John, I didn't know if as the design professional architect on the board tonight, if you would be willing to kick off the deliberations.
I could do that. Where to start? I think the things that I find interesting about the house, just going through the slides, are kind of the front side, or at least the chalet side view of the house, which is a fairly strong kind of reflection of what it was supposed to be, the image that it was supposed to present. I haven't really studied the floor plan based on what was presented here, so I'm gonna have to take Stephen's word for the quality or lack of quality in the kind of functional designing of the house. That's, I believe, what's being referred to. Having been involved with houses, in fact, lately, that have spiral staircases in them, it's a very problematic feature in a house. It may be dramatic in certain instances, but in mountain houses that are more than 2 stories, that have only one way of accessing the top and the bottom, being a spiral staircase, it's a very unworkable situation with things like you end up hoisting pieces of furniture up the outside of the building and similar things like that to be able to just properly populate the house. So that's kind of indicative, I guess, of some of the other problems with the spaces and flow in the house. The fact that the retaining wall was essentially kind of the lateral foundation element of the whole house, the failure of that wall is probably pretty close to fatal to everything. It's pushing the house down the hill. I lived in an unstable, hilly town in my early life, Cincinnati, and once things start moving, they're very difficult to stabilize. They can be, I guess, heroically anchored into the land. You can counter excavate and refill engineered materials and try to stabilize the wall that way. You can do secondary expansion of walls. These are all extremely expensive ways of saving something. And I'm not so sure that this is necessarily worth it. That's why I asked the question about context. And if this were, say, on a slightly different site, or even on a mountain site, had similar problems, I would still not be real sure it was going to be worthy of being saved. To answer the question about the 180-day stay, I'm not sure what that would accomplish if we were not going to undertake landmarking of it, or at least if the intention was not to do it against the wishes of the owners, if it's very clear that their wish is to demolish it. I think I have to throw the discussion open at this point.
Okay, thank you, John. Bill?
I agree with staff's recommendation to allow this building to be demolished.
Okay, thank you. Well, and I know we're in a unique position as far as needing a unanimous vote for certain motions. With the, I guess, the fail-safe option is if we would continue this. So I guess since John opened it up, and Bill, thank you for your comment. I feel like I kind of can see where the Historic Boulder Preservation Committee was torn. First and foremost, because of the age or basically the youth of this building, you know, the staff brought it to the full board, even though they could have made a decision on their own. It sounds like through that research and through really analyzing it, although they thought there was probable cause, their analysis came to a different conclusion. And I am torn on this one. You know, I can always see the value of a stay to discuss it. I do think, I think Stephen did an excellent job explaining the deficiencies. And I don't know how much of that or design flaws or deferred maintenance or whatever. It's hard because I find it very captivating building and the story behind it. And I think one of the reasons I think it's so cool is this particular image we're looking at now is the way it sits on the site too. I think there's a nice way that this has been built on the particular site. But it is a hard one. It's always hard to see something let go, to wonder, like, what if, you know, would a stay yield anything? Would there be anything fruitful that would come out of it, and discussions that would come to different resolutions? So, John, I would like to hear a little bit more from you, but right now I'm leaning towards Bill's and agreeing with Bill at this point about supporting staff's recommendation.
Well, to expand and to take off from where you were going, Abby, I think that looking at it as an architect, especially looking at, say, the condition of the wood members of the structure, the kinds of damage and decomposition that's visible in the wood. I agree with, again, Stephen's statement that everything would pretty much have to be removed and reconditioned. To restore this, you're going to significantly remove and replace sections of the building. And I think that, as I said, I think that since there is an ongoing lateral load through the whole structure, that's doing damage to the structure that may not be immediately apparent. You know, the explanation with the garage was, if it's moving laterally, it's going to compress sections of the structure and expand certain others. The roof on the garage was probably buckling and cracking upwards. The differential settlement that's happening, that causing that piece of steel to punch through the floor plate, those types of things, you pretty much have to go all the way to the structure and rebuild after stabilizing the condition that was causing it. And it is tantamount to demolishing and replacing the building. I do think that it needs to be said, the things that Abby was talking about, the way the building was designed into the site and the way it was intended to make a very understated presence in the landscape. I think that's a consideration that has to be brought forward as a reference in whatever subsequent designing happens here. And I think that that's probably the thing that I was trying to say in the beginning. This first image of it kind of expresses all those intentions, and I think it does it very well. It's sad that what's behind it is being pushed sideways and falling apart. It could be restored and saved, but as I said, it is probably almost equivalent to completely taking the thing apart and reassembling it. So it's not much different from demolishing it and replacing it, depending on what it gets replaced with. So I'm leaning towards staff's recommendation. One thing I want to address, since Patrick brought it up and I was sitting here thinking it when Marcy was presenting, man, is this area ripe to be considered as a district of some type? And I think that that's a discussion that needs to be had completely outside of this proceeding.
And Laura, I want to give you the opportunity. You may not have anything you wish to share, but just to give, oh, your hand is up.
I know, how rare.
Hi.
I actually have a question. I just want to make sure I'm understanding the process correctly. I think I understood in some past discussions that the significant elevations that you would want to protect or landmark are the ones that are visible from a public right-of-way, like a street or an alley. And it wasn't clear to me if this south elevation is visible from a street or an alley, or was this photograph taken from, private property somewhere?
That is an excellent question, which I'm going to let Marcy answer.
That's a very good question, Laura, and something that's unique about this property. So this is taken from the private access drive, and the house, you can see it from below and you can see it from the trails above Chautauqua, which is public, but in terms of how it sits on the lot, the view is more, I don't think we have like a street facing view. It's not visually prominent because of the way that it's perched on this in this location and accessed by a private drive. So and I don't want to keep comparing to the houses around it, but the Willard house just to the north is also accessed by a private drive, but it's very visually prominent from below because of the way that it sits on the hillside and the trees. So it's this house, it's a combination of the private drive and how it's hidden in the vegetation that makes it minimally visible from a public right-of-way.
And I just wanted to follow up on that. Thank you, Marcy. That was very helpful. You mentioned it's visible from the trails at Chautauqua. And I do remember in that previous example, I think it was decided that visibility from the public park was not a concern, but it was from a street or an alley that's a public right-of-way. Would visibility from the trails at Chautauqua be a consideration in terms of which are the significant elevations?
Great question. Those are similar but distinct, different distinctions. With the park at 1804 Mapleton, the park didn't count as a public street, so changes to that wall were not considered removal of a street-facing wall, which is a technical piece of what would require review and what wouldn't. When we are talking about the environmental significance and the relationship to the neighborhood, I would say that it would matter if the trails are public and you can see it from the public right-of-way. That kind of goes to, is it visually prominent or not? But in either case, I would say this building's not visually prominent.
Okay, thank you. That was the question that was percolating for me. I'm really appreciating this discussion, and I'll bow out now.
Thank you, Laura. Those were excellent questions. So it does seem like all three of us who are voting on any action tonight or any motion right now seem to be heading the same direction. But I want to encourage any other thoughts, any other discussion. about this. I want to say to Patrick O'Rourke and Historic Boulders Preservation Committee, I appreciate the time and energy you took to discuss this, because, you know, this is one that there's something special about this place, notwithstanding the current conditions. And I know staff must have had that instinct to want to call it up to the full board. So John or Bill, anything else you want to say or add? I don't know if there's anyone who's ready to make a motion.
I'll add one more thing. I think that the history of this house does need to be captured in some form. I think that documentation of the house needs to be undertaken, which is a kind of a standard request at the point of demolition, and be part of the record of the house. But I wouldn't say monumentation, some capture of this history, which is a very interesting history, needs to be captured and related or relatable. And I'm not sure how. I think that if nothing else, just the kind of document of the house and its permanent residence in one of our historic repositories. Marcy, do you have anything to add to that, or how that process would go forward?
I thank you for asking me, because it is something that we as staff discussed in terms of what documentation would we require. And so I would actually like the board to weigh in on that, because it is unique in that we have the firsthand narrative from the family about the history of the house, which we are usually not fortunate enough to have. And then we also have the original drawings with the narrative telling us what was added or modified later. And so we typically ask for either the historic narrative, which I feel we have between the applicant's materials and the staff memo, and then HAB's level as-built drawings to document the building as it is today. And at the staff level, we were a bit torn, because I think you could make a case that we have documented this building thoroughly through this Landmarks Board review, because we have the original plans and photographs and narrative. But those plans are what it was supposed to be. It's not how it actually was built. So if the board was interested in having as-built drawings as part of the record once the building is demolished, then that's something that we would take your direction and require as part of the approval.
Okay, I thought as-built drawings or some formal documentation of a building that gets torn down was required in all cases, but
it's up to the code says it's up to the city administrator to decide
okay.
In which case. So we have.
So we would include that request in the motion.
Yes, the code actually says that the board can request that staff require it, but you don't have to include it in the motion, but I can prepare that language if you would like to.
Okay, well, I'm asking the question because we want to proceed to that. The other thing is you mentioned the narrative. Is that the oral history of the house as described, and what form is that in? Is that a written narrative?
The packet includes the attachment with a written narrative from the owner about the history of the house. Let's see. And I'm just pulling up the motion language, but I think I have lost the section about requiring document. Oh, here it is. Okay. Let me just prepare this. Are you ready for a motion?
I'd be prepared to make a motion if nobody else wants to do it.
Okay, John, go ahead.
Okay, well, I'm waiting to see it.
Oh.
And then, John, I would say it's up to you to include the language below about the archival documentation.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm going to. So, I move the Landmarks Board adopt the findings of the staff memorandum dated February 1st, 2023, and approve the demolition application for the building. I can't read the address. It's under my.
I muted you instead of unmuting me.
Okay, no, I had to get things out of the way. I'm sorry. I'll start over. I move the Landmarks Board adopt the findings of the staff memorandum dated February 1st, 2023, and approve the demolition application for the building at 105 Bellevue Drive, finding that the building to be demolished does not have significance under the criteria set forth in section 9-11-23F, Boulder Revised Code 1981. With these following conditional statements, should the board choose to issue the demolition approval, staff will require that prior to any demolition, the following be submitted to staff for review, approval, and recording with Carnegie Library: measured drawings of all exterior elevations of the building, a site plan showing the location of all existing improvements on the property, color medium format archival quality photographs of the interior and exterior of the building.
Thank you, John. Bill, we need a second on this, or would you?
You can second it, Abby.
Okay, I will second it. Now, is there any discussion or any changes to the motion before we do a roll call vote? Hearing none and seeing no raised hands on a motion by John that I seconded. Bill?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
And I vote aye. And then Marcy, if you will kindly take a few minutes to explain the next steps. I know that Stephen has been in front of the Landmarks Board for various things over the years, but if you could just do that for the record, that would be great.
Happy to. So the Landmarks Board has just approved the demolition of the building. And so that approval is valid for 180 days. So that would expire July 31st of this year. And so as a condition of approval, the documentation as was included in the memo is required. So Stephen, you and I can follow up and talk in specifics if you have any question about that. But we would need to receive that before we issue the final demolition approval. And regardless of when you submit it, the approval still does expire 100 days from this evening.
Understood. Thank you, Marcy.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So Marcy, as we move on to matters, is it possible, if I believe if Patrick O'Rourke is still with us, I'd like to take a few minutes just about his suggestion of seeing maybe if the Landmarks Board and the Parks and Rec Board could meet to discuss the historic district, or if you have any update on the proposed historic district that was directed by council in June of last year in the Civic Center area, that would be great.
Yes, happy to. And I will also take the opportunity to address the other piece that he raised because the board might be curious. We anticipate going back to a hybrid setting sometime this year. But my understanding is that the hybrid technology is still not ready for us. But as soon as it is, we will go back into a hybrid environment. And then specific to the Civic Area Historic District, that is where my focus has been over the last few weeks in terms of going back and listening to the June 14th City Council meeting and starting to scope that project. It is a work plan item for our program for this year, and starting to reach out to our colleagues in Parks and Recreation, since collaboration with that department is going to be key. So our directors in both departments are going to meet, I think it's either next week or the week after, to kind of help set the course for the Civic Area Historic District process. And I would anticipate thorough involvement from both the Landmarks Board and the Parks and Rec Advisory Board. I think a joint meeting likely makes sense, but we haven't quite gotten down to the details of the process. But know that we have started working on it. And Christopher, I don't know if there's anything else that you'd like to add about it from your perspective.
No, you covered it very well. So as Marcy mentioned, Brad Mueller, who's our director, and Allie Rhodes from Parks and Rec, they'll be getting together with myself here in the next couple of weeks, having a conversation about the plan and the timing and strategy for that district, and really how it dovetails into the larger phase 2 design and planning work that Parks is anticipating for that area of Civic Area starting this year as well. So that's what I know right now.
The other piece is that I'm attending weekly coordination meetings with the other projects, the planning projects for downtown, to make sure that the historic district process is considered and integrated in all of the planning efforts that are kicking off or are anticipated.
Great, that's helpful. I appreciate just knowing sort of what's happening with the historic district, so that's great.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Well, there were only a few other things under matters tonight, and the first one is just to follow up with the diversity, equity, and inclusion training for board members. Brenda, I will attempt to capture what you told me, but maybe if you're prepared, I'll just hand it over to you.
Sure. Yeah, I'm working closely with Ana Silvia Avendaño Curiel, who is our equity policy advisor in the city manager's office. She really is the engine behind these trainings. And she and I met and found from what all the boards gave us that it looks like May and June are the best months to lean into offering these trainings. That allows the new board members to be solidly in their chairs on each board after the recruitment and appointment process before we move forward. So we're aiming for those 2 months. We have looked at your request to be either paired with another board at one of your regular board times, and appreciate you offering both the LRDC time and the I probably did that acronym wrong, LDRC time and this time. And so we're still working on that part. We are also creating some trainings that you could sign up for. So, so that is a question we could circle back in on, but I do think we probably will be able to find a board to pair you with so that you and another board will take this training together during one of your regular board times. So stay tuned for that. I will get back to you when we land on what that looks like. We also heard back, Lucas, from Sandra, that these will not need to be private or public meetings because they are education focused and not business focused.
Sounds good. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Brenda. The next item is a reminder that the 2023 Saving Places Conference is here in Boulder next week, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And if you haven't already signed up for sessions, I would recommend doing so. I still need to figure out which ones I'm attending. And so it'll be really nice to see so many people there. And it's very convenient being here in Boulder for the first time, I think, ever. And then if there's not anything on that, we were looking ahead, and the April meeting falls on Passover. And so we'll follow up with an email to reschedule the April meeting, likely to Wednesday, April 12th, so that it doesn't conflict with that holiday. And then hot off the presses, we found out that we've only had one Landmarks Board applicant. There are 2 positions that are open. And so if anyone on this call or any board members want to continue to get the word out, I don't know if the city clerk's office is going to reopen recruitment or what the next plan is, but that's what we found out just before this meeting. That's all I have for matters.
Does John or Bill, do you have anything?
I have nothing to add to that.
I have nothing to add.
And I don't either.
Can I ask a question about the Saving Places Conference?
Sure.
Thank you, Abby. I am planning to go on all the field trips of the Civic Center, the Little Rectangle, and the Pearl Street Mall. I think they all sound really exciting. Is there something else that folks would recommend that I attend, like the opening session or one of the sessions during the conference?
I would say the keynote speaker is always really great. So if you can make it to that, I actually, off the top of my head, don't remember who it is. And then not to go to any, most of them are wonderful. Abby and I will be speaking on a panel called Preservation in Boulder, the First 50 Years. And so if you want kind of good overview of the last 5 or the first 5 decades of this program, I actually also don't remember what day or time it is, but I'll know by next week.
I think it's Wednesday at either 2:15 or 2:40.
I'll put that one in my calendar for sure.
And Laura, for that session, Dan Corson, who's a former Landmarks Board Chair and Council member, will be joining us, as well as Susan Osborne, who's a former planning director for the city of Boulder, former mayor, and so forth. So it should be, it's going to be great, isn't it, Marcy? It's going to be a great session.
Yeah, it sounds like a great session. It does overlap with the Civic Center tour. Do you know if either the session is recorded or if the tour will be offered again? I'd like to do both. Is there a way I can do both?
I think the panel discussion is supposed to be recorded. The tours won't be.
Okay. Okay. I didn't know if that was a tour that gets given on some kind of schedule or if it's special for this conference.
It's special for this conference.
Okay. All right.
And that will also be a great tour, as will the Little Rectangle. They'll all be great field trips, I think.
It all sounds so wonderful. And I'm very excited that I know about it and have an opportunity to do these things because of being your liaison. So, so many benefits. Thanks for answering my question.
Anything else from anyone?
Oh, just a clarification on the conference. This morning we were mentioning this because we're signed up through Aubrey. We have to tell you what we want to sign up for if it has an additional fee, Aubrey. Okay. I'll be in touch.
Okay, cool. Sorry about that.
No, I just wanted to be sure I know how this is going to work.
Anything else? Then the meeting is adjourned at 7:30 p.m.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.